Good morning to you all. My name is Tommy Airy. I'm recording from Detroit, Michigan. This week, spring arrived. Everything is blooming. The sun came out. It got warm all of a sudden, and we are deeply blessed. Um, Dale and I go back almost 30 years. I was actually his coach. It was for a evangelical basketball team that traveled around Europe during the summer of 1997. I was 23 years old. Dale was 18. And after the tour, we stayed connected and we have turned into dear, dear friends ever since then. At some point between 9/11 and Hurricane Katrina, uh, the script was flipped for us. Dale coached me out of fundamentalist Christianity. Um, the fundamentalist Christianity that I had grown up with ever since I was 10 years old, and just started feeding me works of theology and biblical scholarship that was committed to love and liberation. And I had started to deconstruct my faith, but I needed to reconstruct my faith. And Dale has been a pastor for me um, over the decades in doing just that. So it means the world to me that I get to be with you on this Sunday morning, even though it's virtual. I hope I get to come visit you at some point this year. And I've got a lot of dirt on Dale. I've got some great stories about him. I can't wait to tell you in person, but I'm going to wait for that. This is a message this morning that I've titled "Spiritual Defiance." It is something I formatted out of a Substack post from just a few weeks ago. Um, yeah, thanks so much for having me. A decade ago, Berta Caceres was assassinated in her home in Honduras. She had been on the military hit list for years because she had led her indigenous community, the Lenca, in a movement resisting the mining and dam projects of corporate developers with deep ties to American investors. The Lenca people believe that they come from the earth, water, and corn, and that they are called to be the guardians of the rivers that sustain every form of life on earth. They believe that they are protected and guided by the spirits of young girls who teach them how to give their lives for the well being of humanity and the planet. A year before she was murdered, Berta Caceres talked about the kind of spiritual practice required for her daring political work. Quote, "We started the fight for Rio Blanco. I would go into the river and I could feel what the river was telling me. I knew it was going to be difficult, but I also knew we were going to triumph because the river told me so." Last month, while I was fasting for Ramadan and Lent, which started on the exact same day this year, I felt Spirit seconding the motions on the 10-year anniversary of the brutal assassination of Berta Caceres. I was reading the story of the Last Supper in Matthew's Gospel during my pre-dawn devotionals. It says that right after the meal, Jesus was grieved and agitated because he knew that ruling elites were conspiring to crucify him. Jesus walked to the Garden of Gethsemane with his inner circle, and the text says that he went a little further into the woods and, quote, fell on his face to pray. Jesus threw himself on the ground and poured himself out to something else. I don't think I've ever seen a Christian pray while prostrating, but Muslims do it 5 times a day. During my Ramalant fast, during ramped up ICE raids and the American military's carpet bombing of Iran, I've been reflecting on the ways that prophetic leaders like Berta Cáceres and Jesus of Nazareth metabolize grief and mobilize it, for collective liberation. The professor and therapist Dr. Bruce Rogers Vaughan is a dear friend of mine. In his book, he says that our neoliberal capitalist economy, which isolates people in the West while extracting and exploiting the rest of the planet, creates what he calls third order suffering. There is an epidemic of depression and distress in US society, but Bruce says that it's become more difficult than ever to pinpoint the origins of our heaviness. Bruce understands matters of the spirit in much of the same way as Berta Cáceres and the Lenca people. He says that soul is like a fabric that embeds every one of us within all that is. Soul is a web that inextricably connects us to every living being. Bruce says that our emotions emerge out of the entangled social, political, and economic systems in which we exist. Instead of protecting and serving people, more and more these systems are protecting and serving corporate profit. Third order suffering is a sign that the soul fabric is ripping apart. However, neoliberal capitalism trains us to either blame ourselves for our heavy feelings or to just stare into the fog like a zombie. Bruce says that the worst thing that we can do is numb our grief and agitation with addictions and distractions. The alternative is to press the pause button, to pay attention to our pain, to feel it, to process it, and then to allow it to speak in redemptive ways. Bruce says that depression is our soul's sigh or cry of resistance. He calls it the despair that bears witness. Our lamentation is a form of prayer. When we wake up and engage it, our grief and agitation can transform us and transform the world too. More than 3 decades ago, Walter Wink wrote that depression is not neurotic, but a healthy sign of our capacity to take in the suffering of the planet. Wink was an activist and theology professor who was writing about what it means to redemptively engage in what he calls the powers, the ideologies and institutions that order our society in all sorts of insidious ways. Wink proposed that racism, capitalism, and militarism are more than just beliefs that people subscribe to. They have the power to possess us, like demons. Islamophobia is one of the powers doing a lot of heavy work right now. In America, the lives of Muslims matter less than everyone else. Just dig in and research how many politicians, pundits, and influencers in the past year have threatened and scapegoated Zohran Mamdani, Ilhan Omar, and my Congresswoman, Rashida Tlaib, solely on the basis of their race and religion. Last month, during Ramalant, a sitting congressman tweeted, quote, "Muslims don't belong in American society." Just imagine what would happen to a politician or a CEO if they proclaimed that Jews don't belong in American society. Islamophobia is not just some sort of bad idea that backwoods folks subscribe to. It is a power that possesses a culture of fear. Islamophobia is not rational, it is emotional and spiritual. So is Zionism. Zionism's the belief that all the land of historic Palestine belongs to Jewish people because God said so in the Bible, and or because the Jews were there first. Zionism is a power that has hoodwinked conservative and liberal Americans into staying silent and walking on eggshells in the face of horrific things being said and done to Arabs and Muslims here and abroad. Zionism deviates from the dictates of love, moral logic, and international law. Its demonic power thrives on disinformation, blame displacement, and quoting Bible passages out of context. The grip that Zionism has on Americans does not make any sense unless we understand it as a kind of dark energy that attaches to people's unprocessed grief and trauma. Jewish author Peter Beinart says that Zionism is not just an ideology, it is idol worship. In American society, the same is true for neoliberal capitalism, careerism, celebrity culture, AI, American exceptionalism, social media algorithms, and patriotism. If you take a stand and call out these powers, if you refuse to cooperate with the fairy tale mythology that has made these fake gods worthy of worship, you will become a leper in the eyes of socially respectable people. Of course, when the powers possess people and institutions, they cannot be neutralized by crafting better arguments. They can only be cast out. 6 decades ago, Harlem street lawyer and lay theologian William Stringfellow called for politically informed exorcisms, like the one performed by the notorious Catonsville Nine in 1968. These holy renegades stormed a Vietnam War draft board in the middle of the day, stole 378 draft files, and took them out to the parking lot and set them on fire with homemade napalm. Then they waited in prayer and song for the police to show up. This creative, nonviolent hit and stay action did some serious work on the soul of America. The Catonsville Nine did not end the war, but they did cast out the demon called Vietnam from thousands, if not millions, of Americans moved by their witness. Back in the 1960s, Stringfellow warned of a demonic technological totalitarianism that was taking over the constitutional institutions that at their founding in the late 18th century at least partially prioritized the protection of human life. Stringfellow lamented the out-of-control growth of principalities like the Pentagon, the FBI, the CIA, secret police and security agencies, as well as multinational corporations, conglomerates, and utilities. Stringfellow waved the red flag decades before mass incarceration, the militarization of the police, Palantir, ICE, and AI. The power of principalities he exposed has grown exponentially since his death 40 years ago. Walter Wink said that intercession is the spiritual defiance of the powers. He said that prayer is the strongest weapon in our soul arsenal because it has the power to cut through, quote, the atmospherics of imperial legitimation. prayer delegitimizes the powers and visualizes an alternative future summoned by something else. This is what Berta Caceres did when she waded into the river. This is what Jesus of Nazareth did when he fell on his face in the garden. But prayer only makes sense if you believe in something else. Capital S, capital E, something else. And belief is not just about mentally assenting to certain ideas. Dr. Butch Ware says that in the Quran, there are more than 200 passages about the heart, but the mind is not mentioned once. The split between the head and the heart is a Western construct. It is not found in indigenous cultures, like the Lenca. The heart is where feeling and thinking happen together. Dr. Ware says that if we don't have an emotional stake in the story, our data and analysis won't do anything for us. Brazilian liberation theologian J.B. Labano once wrote that prayer is not rational. It is our invitation to experience the mystery of God. It is a beckoning out of our head into our heart and our body, immersing ourselves in the free, the creative, the unforeseen, the original, and the spontaneous. Walter Week's spiritual defiance is rooted in what he calls the integral worldview. It is the conviction that everything that God creates is interconnected. This is the paradigm shift that the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King preached time and time again, including when he was in that jail cell in Birmingham. Quote, "We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. The integral worldview is an indigenous way of being and seeing that subverts the isolated, individualistic Western Christian orientation that dominates American culture. Prayer works because everything is connected to everything else at the soul level. My ancient Celtic ancestors called this ficha foicha, a Gaelic phrase that describes how the eternal is woven into and through every living being. The soul is not in the body is in the soul." Back in the 1960s, during her agnostic days resisting the Vietnam War, the poet Denise Levertov was starting to sense that there really is something else that's bigger than us and totally committed to us. Straight from her poem. Something is very gently, invisibly, silently pulling at me. It's like the deepest part of who we are is attached to a world wide web. Again from her poem. No barbed hook pierced and tore me. Was it not long ago this thread began to draw me? This greater power does not coerce, it compels. And one more time, straight from her poem. Not fear, but a stirring of wonder makes me catch my breath when I feel the tug of it, when I thought it had loosened itself and gone. In these days, it often feels like love is gone, like we are all alone in this fight for the soul of America. like all this grief and agitation are too much. We can drop the fear. We can let a little wonder in. We can do something defiant and totally irrational. We can pray.